Hey guys, it's me, your favorite YouTuber with frequent uploads since 8 months ago. Don't worry about that one. Anyway, howdy y'all. If you haven't noticed and you've been living under a rock for about the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, there's been this trend, as we'll call it, popping up on YouTube that's replaying these classic games. You got your Marios and your Super Mario Bros. And all of these, and they're all with some unique challenge to them. You can't press left, you can't collect coins, yada yada yada. They've been everywhere. But you see, as a child, I was never huge into Nintendo consoles. I was never really big into Mario. I had a Wii, I had a Game Boy, but it was never really a huge part of my childhood. I actually always grew up, for the most part, on PC games. So I figured, why not add a little twist of my own to this challenge that's been going around for a while. Now, one of the games that defined my childhood, and I would love to do like a 2 hour video essay on this game, is Spore. I'm not going to do that, that's not this video. But regardless, that was my childhood, that was my Mario. I loved Spore. I got it pretty soon after it came out, and I just played it till the day ended. It's about time we revisit this game. But one of the main problems of Spore is it's too easy, right? All the stages are really short and there's not a whole lot of challenge to them. So why don't we add a unique challenge along the ways of you can't press left from Mario. But seeing as Spore is mostly controlled with a mouse, none of those challenges are really going to work. So I figured the whole point of Spore is you take your creature from cell stage and you evolve it into space stage. But what if we didn't evolve it? What if we didn't improve our creature? Is it possible to beat Spore without evolving your creature at all, without changing him any way since you spawn in from cell stage? Well, technically, yes. Let's go into it. Now, if you've played any of Spore or heard any about it, you probably know how the stages are, but I'll go ahead and remind you. There's Cell Stage, Creature Stage, Tribal Stage, Civilization Stage, and Space Stage. For the purpose of this challenge, we're not going to be using the editor for our creature at all. We're going to minimize ever opening the editor. There are a few times the game will force us to do that. I'll get into that in a minute. But other than that, we never want to go into the editor. So that means no cell stage editor, no creature stage editor, no editing our creature to give it like masks or hats to buff its stats in tribal stage. And civilization stage, I added a little challenge on myself and said I had to use pre-built vehicles and buildings, but that really didn't really affect it much. And in space stage, there is almost no effect. This challenge is basically done if you hit space stage because there is practically no customization available there. Now the stages that we really need to focus on are cell and creature, but I'll quickly go over the rest right now. For tribal stage, the only effect that we're going to have is a weaker creature, meaning that your guy is not going to be very good at hunting, you're not going to be very good at combat or any of the like. You're going to be very slow. That was really the biggest difficulty of tribal stage, was how slow my creature was. People, when I sent them out to socialize, nearly starved by the time they got back because they move at like a meter per second. That is nothing. However, generally speaking, you're going to notice a little bit of an effect on this. Your tribal stage will be a little harder, but I would recommend going for a social victory for the most part, and you'll be fine. Civilization stage, like I said, would be pretty much unaffected. What you did to your creature has no effect on the way you actually play civilization stage. You're controlling the vehicles and the cities. But I decided to only use pre-builts, which might have made it a little bit harder, but if you've played Spore again, you'll remember that the hardest part about Civ stage is how quickly you can beat it, because it's a joke. Nothing about it was difficult whatsoever, and I breezed right through it. As I said earlier, space stage is completely unaffected. Play it however you want, then you can blitz your way to the galactic core, which is what speedrunners would consider the end, and what I used as the end, and you're done. No effect on there. Now let's get back to the first two stages, as they present unique problems in and of themselves. First of all, let's go ahead and talk about cell stage. It is the one that I was bracing to be a little bit more difficult. I've kind of done this before, but I've never gone all the way through cell stage without it, and this time proved surprisingly easy without modifying your creature, because I went with a very intelligent decision of herbivore. Now you see, if you're a carnivore, cell stage will get increasingly difficult as it goes on, because you're going to have to keep killing things or rely on the scarcer and scarcer pieces of meat along the ground. And you can make use of the weapons of the game to do that. But as a herbivore, there's always going to be plants. Now, granted, the enemies will get stronger and faster, and that can be hard, but you can always brute force your way. Just eat more plants, and you're good. Like, that will always be there. I was just bracing my strategy in there was to just eat plants, die if I have to, and get through it. But it was a lot easier than I even expected. I never died. I literally finished it fast enough to get that achievement which popped up, which is finish cell stage in under 8 minutes. And I believe I timed it myself, and it came out to a little over 5 minutes was the time to beat cell stage. So our run was actually off to a really good start. However, the really good start ends when you hit that button to go into creature stage. Now, if you notice what I said before, I wanted to minimize the number of times we ever enter the editor. We're already not allowed to make changes, but there are a few mandatory editor moments, and they happen at each stage change. There is the mandatory evolve and get legs when you hit creature stage. You're not going to give legs in our case, but that is one editor enter. At the end of creature stage, you're given one last opportunity to modify your creature. Now, once again, if you modify it here, it doesn't actually count as a generation, whereas in the initial part, it counts as a new generation even though you haven't changed anything. A bit annoying, but whatever. We're done. That is 2 editor enters. Now, the end of tribal stage is the most painful part. We have to go into the vehicle editor. Now, we're not actually making a vehicle, we're just selecting a pre-built, but that is our 3rd editor enter. But before we can even start civilization stage, we have another editor for the city hall. We have to do 2 editors at the end of tribal stage, bringing our total count up to 4. And then finally, when you go from tribal stage to space stage, you have to enter the editor to design your spaceship. Once again, we're selecting from a pre-built, but that brings our total editor enters at the minimum up to 5. And that's where it's going to stay. As it turns out, we don't need to enter the editor throughout all of creature stage, even to trigger cutscenes that would normally happen upon your creature evolving. Now, let's get into creature stage, because, whew, was this one fucking beast to conquer. Now, if you wonder, you start off creature stage as your little cell guy here, who can kind of slug around, and he has 2 abilities he can use, plus his super ability from the cell stage. He can sing with level 1, and bite with level 1. So early game in the starting area, all the creatures around you are also going to be kind of fresh out of water ones. And you'll be able to actually befriend them to get your DNA up and get your first ally slot. Now, if you get really lucky, I didn't, you would be able to find somebody with a singing level of 2 nearby your base. And that would be their only, social stat. The way your power-up from cell stage works from being a herbivore is that you can press it, and creatures in the vicinity are going to be easier to... Well, they won't attack you. That's very important. We'll get into that later. And they also are going to be easier to persuade using the social options. Meaning that your level 1 sing will be able to match their level 2 sing. I wasn't this lucky. I never really ran into somebody that I was able to do with that. So my gameplay was extended a little bit. But if you're recreating this at home, and it won't take you too long, hopefully, you can use that to get a nice early start and maybe even keep socializing longer than I was able to. Now, eventually, you're going to run into less and less people you can socialize. They're going to evolve, they're going to get stronger, and you won't really be able to socialize them, sometimes even with the siren song. If you really want to target people with one or two stats total for their social, which are going to more and more often be hostile creatures to you. So you'll already have to use the siren song so they don't attack you, and then you're gambling on actually being able to befriend one of them before they turn hostile again. Now, another very major problem I'll just talk about right now to this run has nothing to do with the challenge, and more to do with the fact that I'm running Spore on a Windows 10 machine, and not everything works perfectly, even though there's no mods. For example, there were several times where Spore's lack of an autosave feature really comes and just bites you where it hurts. For example, I decide I want to die, but I'm a little bit lazy and don't want to go to the ocean. I'll explain why you want to die in a minute. That's not important. So I go to an epic and I let it stomp me, and the game crashes. And about 30 minutes of progress is right down the drain that I have to redo at my sluggish walking pace, occasionally stopping to eat because my creature always gets hungry from his slugging around on the ground, and failing at socializing with people. This happened a couple times through the game, and I probably lost about an hour of time thanks to crashes between saves. By the end of creature stage, I was saving pretty much after any notable action, even killing a single guy. But I figure I should explain the dying to you, as there are quite a few times in this run where I purposely swam out into the ocean and died to the sea monster. You're probably wondering why. Well, something that happens twice in creature stage at least is a migration. Basically, everyone from your nest gets up and leaves you and goes to a new nest. This normally happens after you have just evolved your creature, made it a little stronger, probably after clearing the starting area, and the reward is 25 DNA the first time and 50 DNA the last time. DNA is exceptionally precious, as the later in the game you get, the harder and harder it becomes to get, since your creature is basically worthless in a land surrounded by very powerful creatures. So these migration events are very important to trigger, but we can't enter the editor. However, dying for any reason is enough to actually trigger this. And seeing as dying in combat makes the game really like to crash, swimming out into the ocean and dying is an easy way. And it also isn't going to make anybody hate us at the time of the game where we desperately need any allies we can get. Now, once we have our two migrations down, which will happen at different times of the game and at different parts of your evolutionary progress bar, we can get into the mid and late game strategies, as the early game strategy is using Siren Song to basically ally people who have low social stats and high combat stats, which is actually super useful for the late game. But we have to talk about mid game, as this is definitely the most grueling part of the creature stage run. Mid game in a creature stage run, you are going to be you only have maybe 2 or 3 allies. I generally consider mid game 3 allies, and you are unable to really kill anyone, but you're also unable to socialize with anyone because you're just too weak. And you're probably pretty close to that 4 ally mark, which is very important, and what I mark as the transition into the late game in terms of this strategy. So how are you going to get that DNA? Well, you can't get the second migration event until after you unlock that 4th ally, from my experience. So that 50 DNA you can't get yet. But there's one secret, one little niche part of the game which came in handy, and that is eggs. Creatures lay eggs. Most of them do. Sometimes it takes them a while to lay them, and I had to wait as much as 15 minutes once to get a single egg to drop, which was really annoying. But eggs are dropped by any creature. Eating them instantly makes the creatures around you hate you. However, it also instantly grants 25 DNA and a jump in your DNA bar. And since the creatures are going to be passive to you when you first go in there, you can pretty much always get this guaranteed. Now, 25 DNA is not a lot. Generally speaking, allying or extincting a species at this stage of the game will net you between 30 and 40 DNA, and a single egg will make everyone hate you and not even get you that much. It's slow and it's grueling. However, if you do this to get to the fourth member of your pack, you have entered the late game and there's almost a little bit of fun to be had. So the biggest problem of the egg strategy is getting a species to lay eggs, as when you first discover them, they're not going to be laying eggs. And I ran into an interesting glitch where if I reloaded a save, for example, the eggs killing went wrong, and I just instantly died and the game crashed, the eggs would then be just floating in midair. And you can't get them down. You have to walk out of the zone at your exceptionally slow and sluggish pace, walk back, probably eat because so much time is allotted, to get the eggs to go on the ground, just to eat them and have the entire species you're nearby hate you. With that out of the way, we can enter the late game. Late game is essentially get a lot of people in your pack. Now, obviously, if you can, I would get as many of the strong but weak social skill creatures that you could get from earlier. Now, you'll probably run into a limited amount, and by the end game, I was literally just swarming them with members of my own species. But the ones who do a lot of damage will make this faster. However, your own species are getting tankier as the game goes on, just because of how the brain system works. So I'm not certain, but I think having a lot of your own species could literally be better. What you want to do is go to a nest of people. If they're not hostile to you, eat one of their eggs and run. You want them to already be either mad or angry. But at this point in the game, there will be an excess of creatures who start mad or angry at you that you can bait. You're going to want to stand relatively near their base so that one of them, but just one of them, gets aggroed onto you or one of your followers. Walk a little bit away, let him charge at you, and then swarm him. The rest of his pack shouldn't join in. If it does, reload. Oh yeah, did I mention save very frequently? I use saved before and after every kill because this is a grueling process and you usually need to kill like 7 to extinct a species and get that juicy DNA. But once you have killed him, go eat, heal up at your base, do whatever to get all you guys at full health. He'll usually bring one of your allies down to very low and a couple other at medium. Try and make him not target you specifically, as sometimes it will get you right near the brink of death, and I don't really enjoy that. But get healed up and then go back and repeat until the species is extinct. I would try and avoid dying to reset your hunger. I learned that the hard way because it reset their nest full of people. Didn't reset the extinction process, but it made it really hard to aggro just one. I would always be aggroing 1 or 2 or 3, and that's way too much for us to fight because we're 4 guys who only know a basic bite. We'll win, but it's not fast. However, this strategy will work. It is very grindy. Not always the most fun, although it is quite satisfying seeing all of your minions just swarming and decimating a fully maxed out endgame creature. And at last, the second you can evolve to tribal stage, do it. Well, save first, because you never know when the game's going to crash. But evolve to tribal stage, and this challenge only gets easier from here. I'll go in slight detail over the strategy that I used for tribal stage, but you can do mostly whatever you want. Combat will be much harder, but it's still doable. I personally just went all friendly. The one thing you have to consider is your guys walk really slow. So before you ally a tribe, you need to stockpile food. Because the second that you've allied them, assuming this is the first tribe, you're going to have other tribes pop up. Your guys move really slowly. So you need to immediately send them over with gifts of food so that you won't get raided. Because you don't want to get raided and get hostile with said enemies. And since your guys move so slow, I cut it really close to delivering a gift as there is a raid mere seconds from attacking my tribe of completely defenseless Moroccans and didgeridoo players. However, with that out of the way, you can, for the most part, get tribal stage done without too much extra challenge and move on to the civilization stage. Depending on how you played, it will depend on what you start as here, but I ended up being completely peaceful and I started as religious. Civilization stage is really easy. All I did was just mass units and easily conquer cities. No other nation got even a second city. There's not much challenge here. And at last, with civilization stage done, we can move on to space stage. And while, yes, we haven't beaten the game yet, the challenge is done from here. The only customization you even have is your starship. It won't affect anything. You can play as casually or as quickly as you want, and just get to the galactic core to be considered winning the game. And that, my friends, means that yes, it is possible to beat Spore without evolving your creature at all. You can take this garbage little cell that comes in from an asteroid and, despite what the game tells you to, not change him at all and still conquer the galaxy without a single problem. Well, without a single problem you didn't overcome, that is. Hope you all enjoyed this video. I really had a lot of fun making it. It wasn't fun watching Spore crash, but it was really nice to get out and have a quality video. I know I haven't really done a whole lot of videos in 8 months, but don't make it sound like there was a lack of effort. One, I am quite busy with university work, and two, I have actually made about 4 videos, which I didn't really like the way they turned out. They weren't really up to my standards, and I never ever really wanted to publish them. And I made another video, but that's unlisted because I guarantee you it would just get copyright strike the second I put it up. However, I do really enjoy making videos like this, these kind of challenges, and if it receives some positive feedback, I could possibly do more sport challenges or even a few of the other games of my childhood to make them a bit more interesting and up to date with the modern YouTube trends. Thank you all for watching.